Pavarotti.
Pavarotti?
Name of Pavarotti.
He gives me chills.
Let's listen to Pavarotti.
Hello, welcome to The Revealing. I'm your host, Pavarotti, here to discuss the Idaho 4 case. Now, I got a quick one for you today. We're about to hit the road to go visit some more family, but there's a few things that have been on my mind the last few days, and I've got to send a challenge out there to any truth seekers, whether it be content creators or, people that are following this case, to do some research. Assist me in this endeavor as it relates to the federal grand jury. Because more and more as I try to dive into the federal grand jury, and remember, this is the key point, y'all. The grand jury that indicted BRYAN KOHBERGER was a 3-day convening of a state grand jury looking at evidence that was presented to them by the prosecution to determine if there was probable cause to seek an indictment against BRYAN KOHBERGER. Take that, put it to the side. What I'm referring to is the federal grand jury investigation that produced more than 70 subpoenas during the course of the investigation that we know of, because there's 70 subpoenas that the defense has asked for in discovery. Now, the federal grand jury investigation only investigates federal crimes. People say, well, yeah, but Pavarotti crossed state lines. I'm telling you, if you dive in far enough, you'll see that the only way that a federal crime is made if you cross state lines is if you were conspiring on one side of the line and then crossed it to do it. Okay? And conspiring, I mean like somebody paying you. And the only other way is if you transfer the body across state lines. That's it. Or if you, I'm telling you, that's it. If you dive in far enough, you're going to see that. But here's the other point to negate that. There is evidence that this thing goes back, this federal grand jury, to even before the AT&T warrants were filed against BRYAN KOHBERGER. Now, I want you to think about that for a minute, because at that point in the investigation, those were filed on December 23rd, okay? They had zero inclination that anybody across the state line had committed the atrocity on King Road. So how could they convene a federal grand jury to investigate a crime that they would have had no idea that the person even crossed the state lines? It can't happen. That's my point. That federal grand jury was convened to investigate something other than the Idaho 4. I was dead set for a long time that once you unalive 3 or more at a particular time, it engages an act that allows federal authorities to come in and assist in the investigation. But it is a fact that that act will not allow a federal grand jury to convene. It'll only allow the FBI to assist in the investigation. So there is something that federal grand jury investigated other than the atrocity on King Road and had nothing to do with BRYAN KOHBERGER, I assure you. And I implore everybody out there to start digging into this fact, because they blow this one over and try to hide it more than anything else in this case, I assure you. If you go ahead and let me give you a little test. Try to Google the difference between the federal grand jury that investigated BRYAN KOHBERGER and the grand jury, this little state grand jury that indicted him. Try to figure out the difference between those two with a Google search. And what you're going to find is everything is going to take you to the state grand jury. It's a bait and switch. They don't want you to know about it. And even Google is complying on this one. If you find a story that actually even mentions the federal grand jury, in the midst of mentioning it, it'll bring up the state grand jury and then switch gears right in front of your face and then pretend like the federal grand jury didn't even exist. It'll try to confuse you with that state grand jury. So anybody out there with truth and justice in their bones needs to dive into this thing and help me figure it out and get some evidence against this, because that federal grand jury was convened for one reason and one reason only. They were investigating organizations and potential corruption in that town. You can bet on that. But I just wanted to get on here and I wanted to get that out there because I need help in this one because I've been diving, looking, turning over every stone, and I can assure you that that federal grand jury investigation had nothing to do with Bryan KOHBERGER. Somebody get out there and help me on this. Please like and subscribe to the channel. Post your comments, thoughts, criticisms. Till next time, Pavarotti's out.
I was an ordinary boy until I broke the rules my life destroyed.